Welcome to another episode of Northside Now. This is the podcast where we take you on a tour through all of the ministries and the latest happenings around Northside Church to keep you better connected with your church family. My name is Patrick, and with me as always are my co-hosts, Glenn Miller and Kevin Bryant.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. One of these days I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to put Kevin's name first.
And then I'll go.
We will all be at a loss for
the
words.
stall.
Well, also joining us today in the podcast room is the one and only, the spectacular Andrew Ervin. What's up?
How you doing? It's good to be here.
He's the Ervin to our team here.
Magic A.
Magic Ervin. Magic Andrew.
Whenever I write your last name, I do want to spell like Magic Ervin Johnson with an EA. I don't know why, but
It's pretty common.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
We're smack dab in the middle of the holiday season.
We are. It is officially Advent as you're listening to this.
Yes, advantageous Advent.
Yep. Are you looking forward to Jesus coming this year?
I am. I'm just a little worn out from all the excitement and fun from Jingle Jam. But yes, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But you know what, guys? A lot of times in the holiday season, it does kind of get a little blah, a little blue, or a little frustrating whenever you're dealing with family. You got to go get patted on the head as a kid sometimes, then you got to go be with family, and there's always that one family member who maybe doesn't act right or sips a little bit too much of the wine at dinner or something like that.
And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't have a family member like that, you are that family member.
That's quite possible. So, Andrew, we wanted to talk today a little bit about, and all of us, about just kind of the holidays and navigating these days, specifically around alcohol, drug abuse, those kinds of things, but also just in watching our own mental health, our own emotional health, as we deal with the family dynamics and as we deal with, maybe I've been doing good with my walk with alcohol, but now I'm going to the office Christmas party, or I'm going to the Sunday school party, or I'm going to somewhere and there's going to be, friends are going to have something there or whatever. And all of a sudden it's a holidays, a little extra cheer, and maybe I break some of the discipline. Today we're talking mostly these substances, but man, it goes over to like food and all kinds of other things, right? Spending too much time, not sleeping enough. I mean, it goes over to the whole thing. But what would you say, just to kick this off, would be like your number one tip you would tell someone walking into this season, knowing that it can be kind of a dangerous time frame for all of us as we get into this time frame?
I think the biggest thing you have to consider are, what are your triggers? And then how do you get out? Like what's your boundaries?
Your escape plan.
Yeah, you have to know your triggers, and then you have to have a plan. If you go into it, it's going to be there. Those things are going to happen, and you want to be around your family. You want to spend time with them, and that that's a possibility. Okay, so what's the trigger? And then have a boundary, and then know how to get out.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought about, because we had to do this early on, when some of you know my story about us adopting kids, it's been 13 years ago now. But in the very beginning, especially, actually all the way through, we realized pretty early that it's not going to be like the family Christmases or Thanksgivings or gatherings before. It's just different. I mean, there's more of us, for sure. But like you said, Andrew, a lot of the different things could be triggers that weren't for the people that gathered before. And so as awkward as it may sound, once you get your plan and you have your boundaries, to actually talk about it with your family. There's no easy way to do that. But if you can just let them know, here's what we're facing. If this happens, I'm going to do this. And if it happens, you'll know. And it is just the way it is. And for some of us, it may mean you don't get together. I mean, that's a really tough one, because if your boundaries are something that everybody can't respect and honor, then you just can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of other things as we've walked through teenage years with our kids, still doing that. But if you can think about it and plan for it outside of the moment, you have a much better chance. And I can't speak specifically to alcohol and drug abuse and use, but for other things, I know we're much more successful when we deal with it prior to the moment.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, it's just nearly impossible. Your brain shifts to a lower gear and you're surviving and doing what you need to do at that point, and you just can't think rationally.
Yeah.
It's been my experience.
Y'all's brains have different gears?
You're just on all the time.
I feel like I'm in that low gear all the time.
What about groups and expectations? If you're putting together a party or something like that, do we have any tips for setting the expectations? I think a lot of times we want to do like, you either want to have like the fun Christmas vacation kind of vibe, like, oh, everything's going, it's all party time. Or you want to have the, oh, it's so awesome and romantic and sweet and perfect Hallmark Channel kind of business. What are some things that we can set for holiday gathering expectations? Kind of what Kevin was talking about a little bit going into it, a plan, but maybe even as the host or as the group of people that are putting something together.
I think that you got to think about the people that you're going to have. Obviously that kind of dictates what you're going to do, so if I'm doing a student Christmas party, it's going to be very specific to students, but at the same time, in that context, you got to think about how to provide an environment that's welcoming to all people.
Yeah.
Because some may not be crazy and some may not want to wear the crazy sweater or, so how do you include them where they feel welcomed? So you have to keep that in mind. And I think that when it goes into family or friends or whatever, you got to think about all the elements, is this going to cause a slip or is this going to cause so establishing that up on the front end is more important than, cleaning up the mess on the back end.
Yeah. Well, and I remember talking with Missy Buchanan last year when we were talking about including older adults in holiday celebrations and stuff to think about, she's going to come over or he's going to come over and having a chair and a comfortable place in the center of, don't put them away in the guest room and leave them in there until it's all over. That's not what they want. But in thinking about gifts and different stuff like that and kind of talking about the plan and stuff, what we were talking about, my mom was an alcoholic. And so as the girls started getting a little bit older and she lived on her own or with somebody or was married or whatever, there would be times in the holiday season when we would go down to visit and I would go over to visit her first before and kind of go on a scouting trip, to see how things were. And then would send a text, everybody else is welcome to come, or we'll be back later this afternoon. You do have to think about those things a little bit whenever you're into those trigger environments. And well, why is it that the holidays just seem to be a natural time frame? Why are the holidays just such a tough time?
I'll answer for myself. It's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Or it's a lot of stimulus, maybe I should say. There's a lot coming at you. There's a lot of expectations, right? As a kid, what was Christmas? For many of us, it was Christmas morning, it was presents, it was, if we were privileged enough to have all that, that was what it meant. And hopefully there was a Jesus element and celebration of that story, or maybe it was one or the other, but it was an expectation, right? That it would be a joy-filled time. Well, as you get older and you find out that not all of that translates in the same way, there's disappointment. And so if you have a family dynamic that's really stressful, generally, speaking for myself, I don't like to run into stress head on. I would tend to avoid it if I could, right? Yeah. It's one of those things, how you deal with conflict. I don't love being in conflict. I can deal with it. I've learned how to handle it. But if I had to choose, I would not choose it. And sometimes when you have a family dynamic that you expect that to happen, anticipation of that is stressful. Or maybe you expect things to be really nice, kind of hallmarky.
Yeah.
And they turn out not to be one time. Well, next time you're going to say, well, is that going to happen again? So I feel like there's just a lot of stress. And some of it's the culture too. It's built up as like the most wonderful time of the year. Yeah. Right? I mean, literally.
Yeah. But there's a song about that.
Exactly. And we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But if your family doesn't fit that, it's not. Yeah. It's not wonderful. And stress makes our bodies do funny things, right? So, from a physical aspect, if you're under stress, especially if it's emotional, mental stress, that kind of thing, physical stress makes your muscles worn out and they hurt. The same can be true for your mind and spirit, I think. I've experienced that at least. And, I think most of us would choose to have no stress instead of stress. And so I think for me, it's the anticipation of it, the expectations that it'll be great. Or maybe you set your expectations really low so that if it goes as you expect, you won't be disappointed.
See,
that's weird.
What you're saying is you're a glass half empty kind of person.
Well, it depends on the family, but I can tell you, generally not, but I could tell you there have been some experiences that I've walked into that were not great at the holidays.
Yeah.
I think you hit it on a key word out of all of it is disappointment. And you can trace that all the way back to as a child. if you get a gift that you didn't want, there's immediate disappointment. And then you have to teach your children how to talk to grandma and grandpa or grandma and granddaddy or whoever it may be and say, oh, I love this gift, even though you didn't like another pair of socks or a pair of underwear or whatever it may be, because you're completely disappointed in the situation. Well, that moment will carry from a childhood to your adulthood. Yeah. It just transitions in the way that it's done. So disappointment could be, I'm going to go and hang out with the family. It's going to be great this year. And something blows up and it's not fun. There's disappointment. Or there's that anticipation to get together as a family, but leading up to it, there's a divorce that is right in the middle that's happening. And that changes everything going into the season. So the holiday season is the one time of anticipation that we all get to be together as a family. But we all know that broken relationships happen. Yeah. So therefore, it creates this blue feeling of how's it going to work this year.
And in fact, they're a lot the norm, really. I mean, with blended families and everything and broken relations, broken families, it is almost feels like sometimes anyways, it feels more normal than it ever used to. And it's been that broken for a really, really long time. Right. We hit it better, I think, earlier than we do now. So how do we deal with that disappointment? Maybe I'm just now starting to address that in my older teenage or in my young adult or my even middle-aged or older adult years. What are some great tips or tools that we might be able to draw from to help us during this process?
Sounds like a great question for Patrick.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at my phone. What was the question?
My mind went really deep all of a sudden. I was thinking, that's a really deep question. You asked this guy to come on here like 10 minutes ago.
I really wasn't paying attention. What was the question?
What kind of tools or tips would you be able to provide for those that may be struggling with disappointment or brokenness in family situations?
Yeah, I don't have anything for that. I hear a lot of people drink their troubles away.
Well, I mean, a lot of people do.
True.
A lot of people do drink their troubles away, which ends up leading to more and more trouble often. You know, we know that alcohol-related crashes are higher in the holidays.
Binge drinking goes up.
DUI records and stuff go up during this time. And it's so funny. We get so caught up on all the tinsel and light, but yet there's a really kind of heavier, darker side. I know the time change. I don't know how much it gets colder. There's so many different things that kind of clash right here at the end of the year. And we call it the holiday season.
I recommend taking a lesson from like bears and just hibernating through the winter. And then you wake up on the other side of it and you're good to go.
Could be a good one. What about just throwing this element out there of if we really made the season about what it was really about?
Hey, don't bring that logic into this.
No. Would that or could that change what disappointment in the holiday season feels like?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I didn't think about really in just this moment is the busyness of the season. You have company Christmas parties. You have maybe even Sunday school class Christmas parties. You've got, not that this is a burden or anything, but you got Jingle Jam and you got Cantata and you got, even within the church, it is so busy. I mean, wouldn't it be fair for you guys as church staff? It is a long marathon in the holiday season. And when we get past it, kind of breathe a little bit, right? So that's just a natural part of it. But if you can focus on Jesus and your relationship with him, Andrew, you talked about this recently, resting in him, trying to de-escalate all the stress and take moments of pause, that might break that up a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier and you were talking about being overstimulated and those kinds of things in the holiday season. And as someone who works on a church staff, it's like we always talk about how, okay, December's coming. Just know that, I'm not going to come home. I tell my wife, it's like I'm going to be home late every night. It's December. It's just the way it goes. We're working in a church. But it's like that everywhere. I don't always remember it being like that. I feel like every year it kind of escalates a little bit, and kind of grows and grows to this. It's this monster within the culture and everything. Because, like you said, you got different parties. And even beyond that, there's so many different expectations that you have from every angle, family, church, culture, whatever it is. And there's just so much coming at you. And it sounds cliche, but we lose sight of the true meaning of Christmas. And it's like, what's really the point of all of this? It's not how many Christmas movies can we watch this year?
Well, and Kevin just alluded to this with Andrew, is that he just spoke about spiritual formation in a sermon a couple weeks ago. And here we are into Advent. It's the beginning of the church calendar. It's the beginning of the season. We're looking to an expectant Jesus. And a lot of people look at that as the birth of Jesus. But as Christians in our faith, we look at it as a second coming even. So let's talk a little bit about spiritual formation and looking at the story of the birth of Christ and stuff. So what if we come to this season and we really do put a lot more effort into our spiritual formation throughout the rest of the year? Talk about, if you don't mind, Andrew, about what Advent looks like in a deeper relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you take the picture of Mary and Joseph, and you think about all that was transpired leading up to this moment of the birth of Christ, you have a young lady who is told that she's going to have a child. You have a older gentleman who is frustrated because doesn't understand how this is all supposed to happen and how I'm going to talk about it. But when it all comes down to it, there's a peaceful star. You follow the star. And then there's a moment of peace that happens in the midst of turmoil. If you think of all the things that we have shared on this podcast, the chaos, the craziness, the busyness, where do we find that moment of peace? And I think you have to create that. You have to carve out that time. And it's not going to come at the place that you most think it's going to be. It's not going to come at somebody's house. It's not going to come. It's going to come at a barn where you have to find your respite away from people so that you can be still. And I think the picture of Christ in that moment in his birth was a stillness. It brought a stillness to the chaos. So establishing that in our lives starts by being intentional. And that may be, if it's late nights working and escalated schedules, then the first thing in the morning needs to be a priority to rest, to let him be with you, to let him love on you in order to get you through those escalated days. So being intentional is making that a priority over the other stuff that we have that takes our time.
I heard something cool recently that reminded me when you said that, spending time reflecting. That might not be in everybody's super comfortable wheelhouse, right? Being with your own thoughts and trying to listen for the voice of God, etc. But it can start small. Like if you don't do anything on a daily basis, give it a couple minutes. If you spend 5 minutes a day thinking about spiritual things or maybe even starting to read a little Bible, etc., see if you could spend 10. Maybe you spend an hour, maybe take it to 2 hours. It's just the incremental things that can build up. And I think as with any kind of trauma-related things, we talk about the holidays and a plan, you have to be intentional. It's not going to just happen. I mean, there's possibility of miracles and lots of different things that God can step in and do. But for the most part, you have to be intentional about setting aside time. And I think all of us would speak to that in our own spiritual walks. But sometimes we need to be reminded because we go up and we go down and lose sight of things and come back. And so it's always been the most challenging thing, but also the most rewarding when I've set aside time in the holidays to do that.
Yeah.
Not easy by any means.
No, not easy at all.
They say that when it comes to being still and allowing yourself to just sit in stillness with Christ, 2 minutes is where you begin. And if you do 2 minutes of breathing in the goodness of God and exhaling all the things and you do that for 2 minutes, if you can get to 10 minutes by the end of December, you have established a routine of just being still with Christ without the expectation of, am I doing it right? Did I get anything from it? Did I do, No, just literally 2 minutes, breathing in, exhaling out, and just being still. If you can do that, it will bring some stability to you in this season of chaos. And it's not just this season, but it's, in the context of alcohol, those that are struggling with that in this season, it's all intentionality, right? So they have to have a plan. And if we're talking about a plan for them, then we need to talk about a plan for ourselves and how do we spend that time with Christ, making him the reason for the season. But how to do it, just increment time, small steps.
Yeah.
Well,
intentionality is so huge, and maybe we don't talk about that enough in the church and just how you need to be. We throw around words like spiritual disciplines and, all these different things. Discipline sounds good, and I know I'm supposed to be disciplined in my life and stuff, but what does that look like on the intentional everyday, day in, day out kind of life? And people who have been struggling with alcohol or drugs, they learn those things and they learn the importance of that. So I want to encourage everyone that might be listening that is struggling with that, stick with your plan. Know what your triggers are and know your plan, your escape plan, your non-trigger plan, whatever it's going to take to, or any part of an emotional part of the holidays. Don't let the holidays be a wreck for you because you feel like you need to make somebody happy in the family center, But I want to throw a big old monster crazy punt into this podcast. And because of what Andrew just talked about, I'd like for us just to take that 2 minutes today and just end here with that cleansing time. Just us. We'll try not to just breathe into the microphones because that would be really weird. But take 2 minutes here before Patrick signs us off. And we're going to be intentional about not giving you any more of the details for the week, for the season. There's plenty of time to do that. But today, for this podcast, to practice what we talked about and to just kind of take a moment. And we'll let the air play for a couple more minutes as we intentionally do that. And then we'll let Patrick sign us off for this podcast.
Before we do that, Glenn, can I throw out one more thing that's been sort of on my mind here, especially for those who are struggling right now? They might not be listening to us, or maybe a family member's thinking about them. I think the one thing I've reflected on recently is that we're not alone.
Yeah.
As a part of recovery programs, there's accountability, right? And we're all accountable to each other. And I know a lot of people personally that are struggling right now with feeling like they're alone, like nobody gets me, and this stuff that I'm dealing with, it's all on me, right? It's my responsibility. Maybe I got into it and I don't know how to get out of it, and I don't even know what to do. And so the message is that we need to stick with someone, find someone. We have plenty of providers for that, but ultimately to remember that we're not alone. Even if we're the only person in the room, we're not alone. That Jesus walks with us all the time. Even if we feel like we're miles away, he's following us, right? That's the way I like to visualize it. And so in this holiday season, when it can be very lonely sometimes, hopefully someone can hear today that you're not alone.
It's a good word, because I do think that there's a lot of loneliness and alone.
Yeah.
But even in the stillness of 2 minutes of just sitting here, you're not alone. And if you allow that to kind of, as you sit here in your stillness and think about the goodness of God and let him love on you where you're at, and know that you're loved right where you're at for who you are.
Yeah. I think about, you're talking about the night that Jesus was born, the chaos part of those night when you're giving birth to a child, a baby. I was in the room with my wife on both of those. That's pretty chaotic, but that star was still there. And she knew she was not alone. Joseph was there. The angels bursting forth to the shepherds. That had to be fairly chaotic, because it would be if all of a sudden I had shepherds lighting up my life right there. But then they went back to a peaceful moment after seeing the baby.
Well, and one thing I think about in that also is Bethlehem was crowded at that point.
Crowded.
There was no available room in the whole city. You know how many people, are just there? So for them to be in that, stable or, wherever, it must have felt like their own sort of private, corner, peaceful place, in the midst of this chaotic city.
Yeah,
and God knows his creation. I mean, he knew his creation, and through this revelation in Scripture and through Jesus' words of, I will be with you always to the end of the age. I will always be with you. God came in with a star and with a baby and with Jesus and with the movement there in Jesus' arrival. And he spoke in the beginning, and boom, and John 1 says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. And then that flesh, Jesus, is also reminding us, I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. And even he himself, when asked, why do you have to go? There's an advocate. You need me to go, because the one coming, the advocate that I will send you, the Holy Spirit, will be something beyond anything I can do for you in this form. So I feel like this is very appropriate. And thanks to Andrew for pinch hitting for us today with us and very last minute, but I feel like this is very appropriate. So for the next couple of minutes, Andrew, any guidance, just really, again, remind us of what this time should.
Yeah, I think if we just take this time, 2 minutes, just 2 times of breathing in, and whatever prayer you want to say, Lord, have mercy, in your mind, or maybe peace, be still, or Jesus, I love you, and then exhale out all the stress, the anxiety, whatever it may be in this season. Just let that exhale out of you, and do that a couple times and just sit with that.
Well, guys, thanks for podcasting with me. And thanks to all of you out there in the world for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at Northside Now Podcast. Go to our website, northsidejackson.com, or email us at podcast@northsidejackson.com. We hope to hear from you soon. Once again, this is Patrick.
This is Glenn.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Andrew.
And that's what's happening at Northside Now.